There is nothing quite so certain as time. It comes, it goes, it passes quicker than we would like it to. Sometimes it passes slower than we would like it to. But most of us with busy homes have woken up one day wondering where the time has gone. The passage of time is a very relevant part of the decluttering process, and today we're going to discuss it.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here are your hosts, Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome, listeners. I'm Ingrid.
And I'm Leslie.
If you're new to the Declutter Hub podcast, you're so welcome. What you'll find is that we try and find a fun factor in the serious business of decluttering. And if you've been here for a while, you know exactly what we mean. So thank you so much for listening.
If you'd like to get involved in conversations relating to this podcast, it all takes place in our Facebook group. So come and join our lovely, warm, supportive community. To find the Facebook group, go to declutterhub.com/group to find out more. Or you can search for the Declutter Hub community on Facebook.
Now, Leslie, we were super excited about chatting about this topic because it is actually a listener request. Jane reached out to us and said, I've been in your Reset Your Home Challenge, I'm in your Facebook group, and I have recently been decluttering my home, and I've come across a lot of outgrown kids' toys and clothes and hair bows and those kinds of bits. And I would love for you to do a podcast about how the time just passes by. So, Jane, this is for you and for all of our other listeners. We have listened to your request and we're going to talk about it today.
I think that's a really useful thing to say, really, Ingrid, because, from time to time, people do send suggestions for podcasts. And I think, we look at everything that comes into the Declutter Hub, honestly. There are some things that Ros deals with, some kind of, technical things, but everything like that, if she thinks that Ingrid and I should look at it, they come straight through to us. And we look at things and we look at whether or not we've already spoken about it or whether or not there's a different angle that we can bring. And whilst we have spoken about time before, we did a podcast about how to declutter when you don't have time. We've never really done something about the passage of time. So that's why we wanted to tackle it today. Now, in the intro, Ingrid spoke about the fact that time passes quickly, and that's the reality for most of us. And certainly for us at the moment, the time is just whizzing by past us. I think the older you get sometimes, the faster time goes, right? As you're nearing the end, it's like, oh, need a little bit more time. But I remember, back in the day when I was like, I don't know, teenager, I guess. And you want to be doing what you want to do, don't you? But I used to have 3 Saturday jobs. I used to go from ones that I was very industrious back then when I was 16. I had paper rounds. I used to sell door to door betterware. I worked in a factory on a Saturday morning, and on a Saturday afternoon, I worked in British Home Stores, in the food when British Home Stores. I mean, British Home Stores is gone now. But it used to sell food as well. And so they used to have like a bacon counter and a cheese counter. And that was when you always wanted to do that because the time would pass really quickly. But when you were on the close and you were just standing around, it was like the slowest 4 hours that man ever created. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Did you have a job like that where you just like, oh, this is like horrendous?
Absolutely. I mean, I like you, I had a job, doing paper rounds, and then I started cleaning in the local motel, and the day would just go by because you would have to do like 20 rooms on a Saturday. So you didn't have time to even think about it. And then I started working in a souvenir shop, which I absolutely loved. But every once in a while, I had to do the ice cream cart and I had to like ring the bell. And I just did not like ringing the bell because my boss would say like at 9:30 in the morning, Ingrid, ring the bell. And I'm like, surely nobody wants an ice cream on 9:30 in the morning, even if it's a nice day. People have literally just woken up. But so the day would just go by.
Yeah, but just let me step back. What do you mean you worked in an ice cream shop and had to ring the bell? You mean like a truck that drives around, like an ice cream van?
No. So we had like a souvenir shop and it sold like souvenirs because it was in a very, very touristy town in the Netherlands, close to where I grew up. and we would have like thousands of tourists every day. So they would like sell shirts, t-shirts, and little ornaments and like all these things. And then
Just
we
like
also,
windmills and
yeah,
clogs and
windmills
packs
and
of
clocks.
cheese.
And I just loved like keeping the store like tidy and organized. It was like my favorite thing. But opposite the road, they had like a second shop which sold wooden shoes and curtains and poffertjes, the little Dutch pancakes. And they would have like a little like ice cream trolley that they would like wheel out and would have like five or of eight different flavors of ice cream. And it had a bell on like the post that you had to ring so people recognize, there's a bell ringing, there's ice cream. But the day I just that was like my least favorite one. I love like doing all the ornaments and folding the t-shirts. Here we go.
But
And
the
like,
bell doesn't take 4 hours to ring. Did you have to sit there for 4 hours ringing the bell,
no,
or
no, no. But like every like
just a
10 minutes,
one-time thing?
he was every 10 minutes like ring the bell. I'm like, it's like 9:15 in the morning. Nobody wants ice cream.
I think I'd have ice cream. I'd have an ice cream now if it was available. But anyway, we digress.
Yeah,
Sorry. So we were just really talking about, and I think the reason why we were talking about that is because the older you get, the faster time seems to go, right?
yeah,
So when you're back a teenager, you want to be doing what you want to be doing. You don't want to be sitting ringing bells or tidying clothes on clothes racks, which is what I was doing. But I think that really what we're here to talk about is transitions and how we deal with it. So how do we deal with the passage of time?
yeah,
Is this something that we do on a regular basis, or is this something we do on an occasional basis? And there are different things that we do. And ideally, we need to be constantly keeping up with our decluttering, going around that cycle of success that we use on a constant basis so it doesn't build up to be something huge. That's the ideal, but it's not always the way that it works, right, Ingrid? So,
yeah.
and sometimes you do wake up and go, why have I still got that I've not used for like 5 years? And a really good example of that is children's toys. So let's talk about children's toys, children's books, children's clothes.
Yeah.
So anything to do with kids, Ingrid.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because what we see a lot is that when parents, have children, that suddenly their time, when they were still, single or together and no kids, you would have far more time. But when then kids then come, all of a sudden, all that time is being kind of absorbed by the kids and taking care of them and their birthdays and all of the things that happen. And a lot of stuff comes into people's homes, right? But because it takes a while to get used to the fact that there's another human or more humans that you have to take care of, and all the routines and the habits and the things that come into it, and all the stuff that comes with it. People just kind of go, suddenly it's like 5 years later, and they're like, wow, what's happened here? And then they start to find, oh, there's actually loads of outgrown toys that they no longer play with. And oh, there's lots of clothes they no longer fit. And there's lots of shoes that, why do I still have the tiny wellies while their feet are now three sizes up? Because kids grow so fast as well, especially when they're young. By the time you think, oh, I'm going to put that cute outfit on, oh, that's too small now. That's gone. So it's all of these things.
And I think that children in general, of course, when we need time to deal with kids, we don't have time because we're dealing with the kids and not the stuff that's related to the kids. So ideally, we'd constantly be looking at that. But you're right. If you think about babies, that go that kind of 0 to 3 month outfit. You've got like a 6 week window for those kind of
Yeah.
thing, and then they've moved on to the next thing. And so, you can be forgiven for kind of not being able to keep up. But I think that, kids in general, it's more gradual, and you do ideally need to be keeping on top of things on a regular basis. So I think kids is one thing, and the time passes so fast, but we need to kind of keep up with it on a regular basis. Otherwise, we will come completely overwhelmed. But there's another few things that we wanted to talk about where it's a little bit more of a kind of one-off recognition that time has passed and that something has changed in terms of a transition. And the first thing that we wanted to talk about really was hobbies. Now, the things related to hobbies, of course, and particularly like crafting and stuff like that. Craft's a great one to talk about because there's so many people that in our communities that love crafting. But we evolve as people and we transition through lots of different crafts. Now, it might be that you've just got one craft that you do and you've just stuck to that. But many people who craft try different things because that's part of their creative nature. They just love to try things. And so, but all of a sudden, you realize in general, same with the kids' clothes, you're becoming completely overwhelmed with the craft stuff that you've got in your home. And you need to start taking some action to start to declutter it. So things like hobbies and crafting, it needs to be more of a one-off decision to let go of that craft. So if you've got multiple crafts on the go, one day you kind of need to wake up and go, I'm a bit overwhelmed. Now I'm concentrating on card making, for example, and I used to do metal art or whatever in the past, and that's not floating my boat anymore. So I need to let go of all of the metal art stuff. It's tough, but that's typically the way that it goes. That's how we deal with the passage of time in terms of crafting, isn't it, Ingrid?
Mm. Yeah, I think so, absolutely. And I think the same thing you see with other hobbies as well, whether it's sport or and also sports that kids do. Linking back to what we previously talked about, kids try different things. They try different sports, and at one point they don't like it anymore, and they start to do other hobbies. But all the stuff that comes with these hobbies kind of, oh, we think, oh, we might go back to it at one point. We're not sure yet. It was very expensive to have to buy all this stuff, craft stuff, stuff for sports, other hobbies. I'm gonna just put it together if you if you've got the time and for it, or it's just dotted all over the house, and then it gets, you're not gonna create space for all the other stuff that now comes in with the new hobby or the new thing that you love to do.
I think the kids one is a little bit easier because we kind of know that in our heart of hearts. There's still sentimental stuff attached to kids stuff. Sentiment is getting in our way, isn't it? And guilt, So all of the emotions that we talk about are the reason why we find this kind of stuff difficult.
Yeah,
But so what we're talking about is not that it's a simple fix to try and let go of these things, but just how it typically unfolds. So
yeah,
the difference between kids is that it's such a gradual thing. Whereas a hobby, you suddenly and that might be gradual as well, as you suddenly fall out of love with that hobby or fall out of love with that sport. But typically it's something that you just stop and move on from. And then
yeah.
probably it's a year or maybe 18 months before you kind of move beyond those emotions and realize that that stuff is getting in your way. And so it will be like a one time, do you know what? I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let my tennis stuff go because I'm not going to come back to it. Sports a really tough one because it's
Mm,
aspirational, right? I mean,
yeah.
I've still got stuff, sporty stuff that you think, oh, maybe one day or maybe the kids will do it, because it's so expensive, so you kind of cling on. But you've really got to look at the here and now. So hobbies is an interesting one, and it will typically be that one-time decision to let go, and then you can kind of wipe up and wipe out and declutter loads of stuff all at the same time. One of the other things that's very similar to that, Ingrid, is digital, right?
Yes. So we are moving, so fast into a digital age now. We've gone from um albums and CDs and DVDs and books to now having e-readers and Audible and streaming devices and music streaming and all of that. But we still have the DVD collection or the CD collection, and we're like clinging on to it kind of while we know we've never even in the last 4 years, or 10 years sometimes, taken a DVD out of its box or of the 200 we have. There's maybe one or two that we once or twice a year grab and go, oh, I'm going to go back to that because I don't know, you can't find it on streaming, or you've got it on a DVD. But what about all the other stuff? And with the digitalization of everything,
Yeah.
basically everything, at one point maybe there will be no more notebooks, Leslie, because everybody uses the notes app on their phone. Who knows? I mean, that's how fast it's going now. Everything is in this tiny device that we can do everything with. But
No.
what about all the stuff that we have in our houses? We actually already 10 or 12 years ago got rid of all our CDs because we put it all on a I think on a player on our hard drive. But now when I listen to music, we've got Amazon Music, because we've got Amazon Prime thing, and we can do music and all of that. I never even now go back to the all the music that's on my computer. But
I know.
we did a clean
Yeah.
cut on it because I was like, I don't even know where to put all this stuff.
I think again, it's how you deal with that. And so the important thing is that we do recognize the passage of time. That's how you choose to deal with it is up to you. So, if we give an example that Ingrid gave there of the CDs and DVDs collection, for some people, the wrench of letting go of everything in one go is just a little bit too much. And some
Mm,
people would need to phase that in. But it's certainly a decision that a lot of people make and go, okay, it's time to let the CDs go, and obviously you've got to be careful when you're doing CDs and DVDs that you've not got pre-recorded ones, like more personal ones, like wedding videos and stuff like that. So you do have to be careful what you're doing. So we would still highly recommend whatever it is that you're doing, that you make sure that you check each individual one to make sure that something has not slipped by the net. Really, really important. Um, but yeah, we make those big decisions, same as we were talking about with the craft. We do that with digital. It's a brave decision, but it's kind of a one-off decision that recognizes that something has changed and gone from our lives that was there before. And so I
mm,
think that's a really interesting one. Um, the other one that I wanted to talk about as well was about fashion as well. Now, there are a lot of people in our world who'll be like, I don't care about fashion. I want things that are comfy. I want things that I love. I'm happy to wear the things now that I wore 20 years ago. But we undoubtedly we do respond to fashion and trends and things like that because we buy things from the shop and they're responding to things. And there are things that we prefer and shapes that we prefer as we transition through life. What we want to wear on our bodies will change. So we really need to sometimes think about fashion and think about whether we are keeping hold of things because we think in our minds we're not bothered about fashion, like we're not bothered about trends and stuff like that. And actually, are we? Are there things in our wardrobe that we're no longer choosing because we are choosing something that's a little bit more modern or a little bit more current? The fabrics have changed. We might have become more sustainable, the way that we buy things. Menopausal women, we need to use different fabrics sometimes, because we're hot all the time and all the time. So there are different things that we need to recognize that passage of time and recognize that transition
yeah.
to allow us to make a decision and move forward from it. So fashion is probably going to be something that's, again, like the toys, a little bit more kind of regular looking at that. But again, if you've got a health issue or something's changed or you've had a transition with work, it might be everything relating to my corporate job, everything that's got a high heel, everything that's, a kind of man-made fiber, whatever it is that is, you might got
Yeah.
all of those are going. And so that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yes, Leslie, I completely agree with you. I think especially with the shoes, right, and the outfits that we used to wear, and I think also as well, maybe maternity clothing. Once you've known that you've gone past kind of okay, this is it for us. Now I'm gonna let go of all of that in one go. Um, all of the stuff that comes with when the kids are small, you kind of hold on to it if you're thinking about possibly having more kids in the future. But at some point, when you've made the decision, okay, this is it for us, then you can kind of go, right, now I'm going to do a big clear out all in one go as well.
Yeah, talking about kids and not having kids, well, all those kind of things that, deciding that your family is done, if that applies to you. Also, of course, transitions, you need to keep up with the transition of a moving family. And so if you are an empty nester, so you're other end of the spectrum, then we need to recognize that and be able to respond to it in an appropriate way. Because what we don't want to do is keep tons and tons of stuff that we don't need because we're not doing the things that we used to when our family were at home. And so there are so many things related to the passage of time. And
Yeah.
when we're decluttering, honestly, a lot of time people look at things and go, I've not seen that for 20 years or 10 years or whatever. And so that's why to do things gradually is so important, right, Ingrid?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think there's a couple of other things that we wanted to talk about in terms of the passage of time. They're a little bit related but unrelated. So let's go to a break and let's come back and delve in a little deeper.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to your podcast all about the passage of time. And I'm now I have these visions of people kind of now walking around their house going, that's that. I don't use that anymore. That's gone. That needs to go. Need to declutter that cupboard. How long has it been since we've done these board games? Oh my gosh, there's stuff here that we haven't played in like 20 years. I used to like puzzles, but no more. I mean, I can see people kind of really, hopefully the light bulbs are going kind of on of all the things that we're talking about here.
I mean, ultimately, on a practical level, to repeat, The way to get around this is to incorporate regular decluttering into your schedule. And then this kind of thing won't happen. It might happen for things like digital and stuff like that, which is a one-off decision. But the transitional things, the empty nesting things, the kids' clothes, it's all about keeping on top of things as you go and not allowing them to build up to something colossal. That's what this is all about, really. But also accepting, for the digital, that we're going to have to make a brave decision. So getting rid of your DVD collection is a brave decision. Getting rid of all of your corporate clothes is a brave decision. Getting rid of your maternity clothes is a massive emotional wrench to that we're not underplaying. So we need to sort of tap into all the rest of the emotional stuff that we talk about in the other podcast to actually allow ourselves to get to a stage where we can declutter some stuff. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about really, Ingrid, or a couple of things I wanted to talk about in the passage of time, which makes a difference to the way that we view things. And one of them is grief, and one of them is sentimental. So let's tackle grief. So we've all heard people saying it gets easy. Grief is a terrible, terrible thing. Of course it is. Most of us have undergone that at some stage. And this is hard emotional stuff. And the things that belong to someone that we have lost are a representation of them. And they're not something that we gladly and easily give up immediately. The passage of time for some people makes that easier. Okay. So over time, once the emotion never ever goes away, the grief never goes away. But slowly but surely we get to a position where we kind of think, okay, I'm ready to let go of certain things, not everything for some people. Some people find it fine. Some people are, I'm happy with my memories and I can let go of everything. Or, I don't need, physical reminders of that person because they're all in my heart. And so it's different for everybody. But we need that recognition that the passage of time and the way that grief relates to that is very different for different people. So we should never, ever be prescribing our thoughts about what an appropriate time scale is on somebody who's grieving. It's very personal, isn't it, Ingrid?
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, I really saw that with my mom last year, when when my dad passed away. He was living in a home, so that room had to be cleared very quickly. And it was because my sister and my mom and I were all together, and we all are quite practical, so we were like, okay, right, the clothes and things that he's worn for years, they 99% of that was okay with us to let it go, but there were other little bits and bobs that we found and we thought, oh, that's really special, we're going to keep that for now, and we can all make a decision about it later. My mom actually was really at home as well. She was like, here's some things from your dad, and my sister and I were both not ready yet. We were like, Mom, we think you should keep that for now. You might be ready to give that to us, but we're not ready to accept it yet. And it was not big items. It was like his cufflinks, his watch, kind of things like that. So we definitely have kept a few bits. But maybe we'll, I think now a year down, more than a year down the line, I think we would look at it with a different point of view, and we would probably be ready to take some of those items. But because they're small, they don't they're not a bother for her current life, which I think is very helpful. I think it's when there's loads of stuff, lots of volumes, lots of big items of furniture, and boxes and boxes full, then it's really hard. We were already, he didn't have a lot of stuff in his little room anyway. So a lot of it was donated. Some of the things have gone into my mom's little storage area downstairs. Some has gone to Max to use. So we're trying to be, of course, good environmentally, and we're trying to, but other things we're just not ready for yet. It takes a bit. It takes time.
And I think, that kind of scenario, Ingrid, where your dad had to go into a care home a few years ago, you've almost got a double grieving process in there,
Yeah,
haven't you? So there must have been the huge amount of grief that was felt at the time. Then he had to leave the family home and go into a
yeah,
care home. And then it comes again when he passed away, sadly. And so the passage of time is very different, right? So it was a little bit more kind of fluid and
yeah,
stepped. I'm
yeah,
sure for your mum and for you guys. But I think the important thing, and I think this is something that a lot of people feel, is that they've been sort of pushed into or made to feel that they have to follow the same time scale as everybody. And I think that's not the case. And that's what's hard about things like probate situations. Certainly that situation where they had to clear your dad's room out, that's hard because that was done within like 24, 48 hours, wasn't it? Because
Yeah.
they have to get those rooms ready for somebody else, and that's
Oh,
because of
yeah.
business. And, so you're not even allowed time to really sit and reflect and those kind of things. And people when the houses
Mm,
get sold. And so
yeah.
it's very tough. And we need
Yeah.
to find a way to deal with that when those kind of situations are forced upon us. But and what that often manifests in is taking boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff back to our own house and then leaving it there for years and years because it's in a box and not in a
Yeah.
room. And so,
Yeah.
we kind of hide away from it a little bit because it's boxed up. And so, yeah, the passage of time certainly becomes easier for most people over time, but there's
Yeah.
definitely no prescribed time. And neither should we, assign it to somebody or accept it from someone else. The time will be right when the time is right.
Yeah.
Um, I think we also wanted to talk as well, Ingrid, about sentimental items and the passage of time with those, because of course, at the time that sentimental items come into our lives, so when a baby is born, when we run a 10K, all of the things, when we receive a
Yeah.
letter, when we receive a card.
When we go traveling and pick
Yeah.
up little bits and bobs from around where we were.
All of those things that are sentimental, the memory is at its highest when it comes into our lives, right? So at the time that it appears, you look and you go, that's very special. That's something I want to keep. So it's at its highest at that stage. And sometimes that high level of sentimentality remains and it doesn't ever wane. But for most or for many, let's say, sentimental items, the passage of time means that it becomes less and less and less special. Now, it might get to a stage where it's still special enough for you to keep it, or it might be, you know what, I've got other more special things that have taken its place, or I've got too many things, or I don't need that many things. And so we need to recognize that the passage of time will mean that the things that we have kept with all good intention at the right time may not be as special further down the line once time has passed.
Yeah. I think that's something that because we assign it to like sentimental items and then we see it as like one big category of sentimental. But I think it's really important to kind of think, okay, but hold on a minute. How can I kind of categorize all my sentimental items and then within these categories find the more sentimental things? I do not want to keep everything from my dad. That would not be feasible for me. But there is a couple of things that I really, really love and that I would love to have in my house. But it's more for me the quality over the quantity here. I don't need everything. My sister picked out a couple of things that I would not have picked, and I'm really glad she did. So we have different ideas of what's sentimental for us, and I think it will work out well in the end. Um, but yeah, it one item is not the other, and we have to even within sentimental items pick the best over the best.
So really, this podcast was all about recognizing that time passes, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but that will have a bearing on the type of stuff that you choose to keep and the way that you choose to deal with it. The fact that time passes doesn't take away the fact that we've got emotional wrenches related to most of those items that we have. So we've still got to delve deep into trying to understand our emotional connections to these things. But just the recognition that actually when things come into our lives, doesn't they don't always remain of the same importance. So we need to regularly be looking at things, the best way to go about decluttering. Of course, often many of us have to do like a big push at the beginning of our decluttering journey. But the whole idea of everything that we teach here is that decluttering becomes part of everyday life. You change your clutter mindset. We don't think about these huge decluttering projects. We're just seeing something and going, do you know what, actually? I don't think I need that anymore. And letting it go as we see it rather than delving into the deep and going into all these things, knowing that it's a huge project. So that's what today was all about. I've quite enjoyed talking about the passage of time. I'm really glad as well, Ingrid, that, things have worked out with you and your mum and your sister, because that's still quite recent
Yeah.
as well. So no, it sounds like you've got it worked out as a family, and that's the way that it should be, right?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's really important that we've all realized that our homes need to work for us now and in the future. And that our homes, y- how can you enjoy your present and your future when you've got all these outgrown things and things you no longer do and things are weighing you down. And I think that's really important. I really hope that has also come through for our listeners as well today. So we really want you to ask yourself, have I got any items in my homes that I've outgrown, that I no longer love, that I no longer do, that are holding me back from living a calmer, less stressful, more organized life, and the person that I currently want to be, and the current person I want to be in the future? Start with all of this outgrown stuff that has had the passage of time. It's time to let it go, time to clear the decks so you can enjoy your current life. So we really hope that this podcast has given you that insight and that you feel inspired to take small steps forward, some small actions. So thank you so much for listening today. We really appreciate you tuning in, week out, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.